and I have no idea what order that these came in, but I remember I was in a tunnel, a black tunnel, and I wasn't traveling real fast, but I was moving through this tunnel, and the tunnel was wrapped with light. The light didn't permeate into the tunnel and brighten the inside up, but I could tell that it was very bright on the outside of this tunnel. And I felt so relaxed and so much at peace. And I knew I died. I remember saying to myself, okay, you're dead, but where are we going? And the next thing I knew, I woke up inside of a beautiful building. I was standing there and admiring the beauty of this room. And it was gold, and it had big arches. I remember three arches on each side of the room, just arched in gold inlay, and beautiful stained glass windows up above the arches, and big chandeliers hanging down from the ceiling with water features. And it was that, and I was standing on a mezzanine looking down into this room. It was absolutely stunning. And it's just the colors and what you felt standing there is just so hard to describe, because it's nothing that you can feel here on earth, but you're at such a peace and you feel so warm and loved. And a gentleman walked over to me, and he was an olive complected gentleman, dark hair, and a dark beard. And he had like a robe on, like a brown robe. And he came over to me, almost floated over. And I told him the beauty of this room and how beautiful it was. And I said, "What is this room? What is this room?" And he goes, "Oh, it's one of our most favorite places." He said it gets the most visitors. And he says, "But you don't belong here." He says, "You have to leave." And he pointed over to a set of oak doors, beautiful oak doors, big, magnificent oak doors, all hand carved. And I remember I passed through, and somebody was with me. I don't know who, but I sensed and I felt that somebody was with me, almost guiding me through this. And we went through these oak doors, and we moved down a set of steps. And I was in a beautiful city, an absolutely magnificent golden city. The buildings were just as high as you could see up into the sky, just gold. The windows were like an opaque. The streets, I mean, there were not any cars or buses, but the streets of the city was just kind of a gold, opaque, clear uh, material. It was just absolutely stunning. And I remember moving through the streets and passing parks, beautiful, beautiful maintained parks. The grass was so green. And I've traveled to the Highlands of Scotland and Ireland, and I've seen some magnificent, beautiful green grass, but nothing compared to what I saw there. There was children off in this park playing. I remember seeing them way in the back playing. And I was moving through this city, and I suddenly got lost, and I became very scared. And because I didn't know my way back. I didn't know how to get back. And I sat down on a curb, like side of the street there. And I got very anxious, and I got very scared, and I was crying, and it got very cold because I couldn't find my way back. And although I could see people, or felt people moving back and forth, I couldn't see them. And I was screaming out to them, "Please help me." And suddenly I looked over my shoulder, and I saw this beautiful white staircase going up into the clouds, way as far as you could see. And I said, "If I can make it over to that staircase, maybe somebody will find me." So I made my way over, and I remember like the sensation of crawling up this staircase. And I have no idea how high I got, or I can't tell you. But all of a sudden I heard somebody yell my name. "There he is. There's Randy." get him. And it almost felt like somebody grabbed me by the scuff of my neck and just whisked me off of those stairs. And when I was whisked off of those stairs, everything around me went black. I was back into my dark little sedated world. Everything just kind of shut down. But my conscious came to light again. And I was moving down a pathway, beautiful pathway, dirt pathway. And on the side of this pathway were beautiful flowers and beautiful trees. And off in the distance, you could see beautiful meadows of grass, just as far as you could see. And a stream or a river ran through this meadow. And I just taking in the beauty. And again, I knew I died. I consciously said to myself, you're dead, but what's happening? Suddenly, this little boy comes out, appeared from nowhere. And I would say maybe 10 years old. He had long, dark hair, like a bowl haircut, with the bangs and things. No shirt on, 3/4 length little shorts, barefoot, olive skin. And he was animated, very animated little boy. He was waving his arms, follow me, So he took me down this pathway further, and we entered into another room. And again, this room was beautiful. Had big picture windows and beautiful leather seats around the room. And he told me to wait there, that he would be back. So I walked over to one of the picture windows, and that river that I described out in the meadow ran underneath this building. And I was sitting watching this river, and there was people, human figures, in the water, not frolicking and playing and stuff, but they were over on the sides, over on the banks of the river. And it looked to me like they were just kind of enjoying the river and enjoying the day and maybe sitting there and talking or something. But again, it's just beautiful, these magnificent, beautiful flowers, and red, green, orange, blue flowers just covered the whole area. And I had no clue how long I was there, how long I waited. But the little boy comes back and he says, I'm sorry, you have to leave. And I said, no, I don't want to leave. I said, I feel so at peace and so calm and comforting. I said, I feel so loved. I said, I don't want to leave. And he goes, I'm sorry, your room isn't ready. You have to leave. And with that, I was back into my dark little sedated world. The feeling that you have is just absolutely undescribable. It's just, I was always afraid of death. I would go into panic attacks when I thought about my own death. And I was a criminal homicide detective for 30 years. That's what I investigated, but I couldn't even talk about my own death without going into a panic attack. So for me to feel so much calm and at peace with the knowledge that I died was just something I had never experienced before. But I remember my consciousness coming awake another time. It felt like I was just at the end of that tunnel again, but I came out into a void, a very dark void. It wasn't pitch black, but it was a deep gray. It was just almost like dusk, late dusk. We could just barely make out figures and things. And these orbs of light were passing by me. And this one orb of light came up, and he telepathically told me I knew I was supposed to follow him. And he took me deeper into this void. And as we moved into the void, you've been to the theater, and you're standing there on a completely dark black stage. And then suddenly a little light comes on over in the corner, and it gets brighter and brighter and brighter. And you see the actress or the actor standing there on the corner of the stage. Suddenly my mother-in-law, my deceased mother-in-law appeared. That same way, that little light started to come on. It got brighter and brighter and brighter. And there she was. She was sitting there. And I recognized her immediately. And I started to call her out to her. Dolores, Dolores, it's Randy. I'm here, I'm here. And she was sitting, and she was sitting very regally. I mean, straight and tall and proud. And her hand was resting on the armchair. Her right arm was resting on the armchair, and her other arm was resting on some type of a counter. And she was dressed in this beautiful white gown with a white sash around her waist, and her hair was pulled up like into a bun, and she wore this beautiful white ribbon around the top of her head. And she looked over at me only briefly, and I was yelling and screaming at her, and then she looked away. She wouldn't acknowledge me. My guide told me we need to move further, deeper into the void. And as we started to go deeper, way in the back, and something very unique about being in heaven is that you can sense and know what's going on around you for 360 degrees. And so I knew way back and behind me, her light was slowly dimming and slowly going off until she just disappeared. And a young man came running by us very quickly. And it was my deceased brother-in-law, probably a teenager, very young. And I knew it in an instant that I knew it was my deceased brother-in-law. He passed us. We stepped moving into the void, and suddenly, way in the back, way in the distance of this void, this light started to come on again. And I knew in a second that it was my mom, my dad, and my deceased sister standing there. I knew it. And I started yelling at them. Mom, Dad, Gina, it's me. It's Randy, I'm here, I'm here. And they only looked at me. They were some way distance away from me, so it was hard to see, but I got the sense that they were looking at me, but then they all looked away. And they didn't want me to pass further. They didn't want me to come further, because I definitely felt that there was some type of a barrier in front of me. And it was moving along with us as we moved into this void. And I don't think they wanted me to pass. My kids told me it was the veil of death, and they didn't want me to come through, because I was not a very religious person. I don't have any religious background. I was baptized Lutheran, became a Catholic so my girls could attend Catholic school. My wife is a lifelong Catholic, but I was a doubter. I was a skeptic. I wasn't sure if all of this even existed. So as we were standing there, and that light started to go off over my parents, way behind me in the distance, off to my right, for some reason, this orb of light caught my attention. And he was moving very, very quickly. This orb of light came up to me very fast. And he stops right in front of me. And the word, now I was in the Air Force for 20 years, so I'm a veteran, and the word veteran just was repeating itself over and over and over again. Veteran, 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 veteran. And this image stops, and his face materializes just for a brief second. And he says to me, tell Madison at the salon her grandfather's okay. And he moved over onto a white porch. And there was somebody with him. I don't know who it was. It was some type of a light figure there that was with him. And he started making red, white, and blue ribbons and American flags, red, white, and blue flags. And very shortly after that, my guide told me, he says, you have to leave. You have to go back. And I was gone. Everything went black. I was back. Maybe people are scared of death, as I was. Like I said, I went into panic attacks thinking about my own death, you know, that my existence would just end. And that's what I believed. It was just like turning off a light switch and everything goes dark and that's the end of it, you know? That's what I believed, and that's what threw me into the panic attacks. But I've learned that there is something after this life. I experienced it, you know, and God, whatever form he may take for you, God allowed me to see it, experience it, and he gave me the evidence. As an old, crusty criminal investigator, I always needed evidence of a case, you know, to prove my case in court. I needed that evidence. God gave me that evidence. He knew that's the only way that I was going to get convinced that he existed. And he provided that to me.